Yes, indeedy, folks. It's the Beer Drinker's Guide to the Great Wahoo. It's time to enjoy a little SOB. That's right, kids. It's the sights of Boise. Today, we are going to wander down this little trail right in the heart of our city. After a very mild autumn, it was December 5th, 2008. It had just gotten cold enough so a little frost would stay throughout the day and be left in places where the sun had not shone. I was distracted by that and got to inspecting a little closer. What a miracle we live in. A little bit later, walking in the brisk breeze, there was this tree. I complain about my neighbor's trees never giving up their leaves, but this one looked like it would have just barely turned color. The geese and gulls seem to be enjoying a quiet, cool day. The beautiful light was setting the white wood without its leaves aglow. I've taken this walk many times and thought I did it regularly. Yet, all of a sudden, here was an entire project that I had never noticed before, completely finished. Right here, next to the Boise Fire Department Training Center, on August 17th, 2008, they dedicated the Idaho Fallen Firefighter Memorial. This is in Riverside Park on Shoreline Drive. It's on the Greenbelt between Americana Bridge and the Fairview Avenue Bridge. I was taken by the textures and the way they work with light. I was taken by the shapes and forms and the way they create a sense of honor and respect. I was taken by the feeling of loss, both of family and of fellow firefighters. The memorial honors 14 men who have died in the line of duty. The dedication ceremony included representatives from Boise, Coeur d'Alene, and Nampa. The first person to have died was in 1894. The most recent in 2007. Over the years, 6 volunteers and 8 professionals have succumbed to doing their job. I find it interesting that in 1894, the first of these people was a volunteer. Boise did not have a professional company at that time. The next 8 were all professionals. 1 in 1919, 2 in the 1950s, 2 in the 1960s, 2 in the 1970s, and 1 in the 1980s. Since the 1980s, all of those who have died in the line of duty have been volunteers. 2 in the 1990s, and 3 so far in the 2000s. These volunteers lost their lives in Kuna, Ingham, and in Emmett and Gem counties. I don't know if it's true or not, but it seems to me that we can give honor to our professionals getting better training and better equipment. And at the same time, it gives me a sense of respect for those who volunteer to fight fires. The day I happened by the memorial, over on the training center, you could see that the firefighters were still at work. Along the sidewalk between the training center and the memorial is this absolutely lovely sculpture. One of the best things about it are the supports in the shape of hands. How more elegantly could it be said that it takes both equipment and people to do this job? Part of the fire hose sculpture is this plaque commemorating the Boise Fire Department. In 1876, 13 years after becoming a city, the merchants, bankers, blacksmiths, and saloon keepers of Boise organized a volunteer fire department. In 1902, this was turned into a professional company with 6 full-time firefighters. In 1932, a program was established to educate children in grade schools. That program, of course, still goes on. In 1975, the fire department built the training facility that we've been looking at today next to the Firefighters Memorial. The training facility was built to give those who fight our fires for us practice with modern and high-rise building conditions. I always thought, my golly, by the time you got the horses hitched up and that thing out to a fire and got some steam in it, it wouldn't be worth the bother. I wonder if they bought these just because they looked pretty and it made it so our fire department was fancy. Of course, the truth is, these machines used steam to push water. Instead of bucket brigades, suddenly lots and lots of water could be thrown on fires. Those quaint little kettles probably saved many cities from doing what had always happened and have the whole city burn down when there was a fire. I also find it interesting that in this 1910 photograph, the streets are unpaved, and yet there are sidewalks and curbs. This is the Idaho Fallen Firefighter Memorial as seen from the Boise Fire Training Center. One of the many unexpected and lovely sights to be found on our intercity paths. Let's get into old McDonald's overalls and play E-I-E-I-O. It's East Idaho, East Idaho. Wow! It's not a very long drive, folks, and there are some mighty interesting things to check out over on the great eastern side of Idaho. During the end of September and 1st of October, my good friend Harold Moss and I had occasion to go exploring around eastern Idaho. In our last exciting episode of EIEIO, we went exploring the Teton Flood Museum in Rexburg and looking at the ruins of the Teton Dam. Today, we're going to look at the beautiful country on Highway 33 over to just before Tetonia, and then we're going to turn up Highway 32. But before we head out on that great adventure, we were just leaving Rexburg, going up just before we turned on to Highway 33, and lo and behold, here was a sign that said Diner and Home Cookin'. Well, folks, if a sign says Eats or Diner, I can't pass it up. And Home Cookin' on the side makes it even less resistible. Even better was this gas station's attitude. Was it ever filled with kitsch? I remember a sign like this on the old Goodman Oil Company coming into town on Fairview Avenue down about 32nd Street or so. When was the last time you saw a telephone booth? But folks, don't wait to use this one. That character inside there is a mannequin. Oh yeah, remember these oil dispensers? And it gets kitschier and kitschier inside. The whole place is just dripping with well-polished memorabilia. Reading material in the bathroom includes an invoice from the 30th of November, 1974, showing that they had purchased 309 gallons of regular gas for $133, 43 cents a gallon wholesale, Must have been in the time when we were complaining because the price of gas was up to, 75 cents or so. My chicken burger was mighty tasty and came with a nice little pile of home-cut fries. And talk about attention to detail, the napkins were mechanics' oil rags. A great idea, actually. They were soft and absorbent, and after all, isn't it just oil and grease that we're trying to get off our hands and face while we're eating? Heading out of town from Rexburg toward the east on Highway 33, we enter into the flat, slightly rolling country that eastern Idaho is famous for. Lots of barley, lots of potatoes. Gorgeous, gorgeous country. I must admit I'm not sure if this was Teton or Newburgh, a sweet little town that you drive through on the way. As you head east, the country begins to swell into larger and larger rolls heading out into the horizon. And then, at once, you look up and you see far in the distance the west side of the Teton Mountains. We'll be seeing more of those beauties, but first, there's lots of land and lots of rolling scenery to enjoy. In the distance, at the base of the hills, we can see the burg of Tetonia. After a long sweeping curve, we begin to descend into the Teton Valley that runs up the west side of the Teton Range. We were here at the end of September, so the hills were covered with the colors of autumn. At the beginning of the valley, there is a nice little pull-out area where you can get a good view of the Teton Valley, and there is this Teton Scenic Byways interpretive sign. It was at this little pull-out from the road that I discovered we had picked up an unknown hitchhiker. I think this fella probably wishes he had chosen to fly instead of take a ride. These next 6 pictures will be looking at the valley from this nice little hillside pullout. We will be looking from the north to the east and then down to the south. This pullout is called the Teton Valley Overlook. The interpretive sign that talks about the Teton Scenic Byway has this to say about the Teton Valley Overlook. Teton Valley was discovered in 1808 by mountain man John Colter, who served with the Lewis and Clark expedition. Early French fur trappers gathered in the valley known as Pierre's Hole for their annual rendezvous. The 30-mile-long valley is bordered on the eastern side by the Teton mountain range. The Teton Range, approximately 10 million years old, is the youngest mountain range in the Rockies. To which your beer-drinking guide says, "Well, I didn't know that." I did have to back up and get some good shots of this old falling down homestead. I remember drives around the state back in the 50s and 60s when we would see many of these establishments in the valleys, up in the Sawtooth Range, and pretty well anywhere you drove, particularly in the mountains of Idaho. Just 2 miles before Teutonia, we turn up Highway 32 and head toward the north. Before we do that, I do want to recommend, if you ever get over to this country, that you also take 33 down past Driggs and Victor. Driving along the west side of the Teton Mountains is truly a spectacular and glorious thing to do. However, Harold and I were going up to see the Mesa Falls, so we headed north, and this was the first thing we saw when we turned onto Highway 32. Now that's my kind of road. As we reach the end of Highway 32, we connect with Highway 47, just between Ashton and Maryville. Highway 47 quickly takes us out of the flat farmland and into the hills. We find ourselves approaching this little dip down into the Henry's Fork of the Snake River. We'll be taking this lovely drive up and visit the Lower and Upper Mesa Falls in future adventures of EI-EIO. "I can't find the cause of your problem," said the doctor. "To tell you the truth, I'm suspicious that's because of drinking." "In that case," said the patient, "I'll come back when you're sober." And that's this week's Beer Drinker's Guide to the Great Wahoo. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you next week. And in the meantime, keep celebrating the Great Wahoo.